we see in chapter 1 already, we have many problems in the fishery sectors, including overfishing and overcapacities, and also fishermen is mostly the same in globally, is low income levels. And also we have the main problem of IUU and high level of technology in the fish sector. So that makes some problems. And also we see in the many areas to develop the culture. But culture also have many problems. Maybe we can see in next chapters, in Korean parts, how we will do. So now we start in chapter 2. Chapter 2 have two parts. One is capture fisheries in Korea, and one is the culture. And I think the culture is not much developed in Korea compared to other developed countries. But in here is we see there are some kind of different type of culture in Korea, easily to understand. So let's go to capture fisheries in Korea. And Korea is the geometrically to see in here. And there are China and Korea and Japan. So the Korean peninsulas between China and Japan, and I think it's very good fishing ground in this area, because in northern part of the cool waters come down, and the southern part is warm waters come up, and they mix in just Korean peninsulas in eastern area and western area and the southern part. So that's why fishing ground is very productive in compared to other area. And that is why the fisheries industries is developed earlier in Korea. So maybe next slide. And this is happened in 1984. We developed the UNLOS. You see very clearly to know about some easy systems between Korea, China, and Japan. The easy system is, you can see in this slide, is very complicated systems between Korea and China and between Korea and Japan. So Japan and Korea, we have the middle lines is 32 nautical miles, 32 only. And China and Korea, we have the 52 the nautical miles. And those kind of what is the easy systems make in Korea, you see here is the fishing ground is become smaller and smaller by easy systems. And also there are many illegal fishings increasing. You see, is a very complicated system of line, because on the fishing ground there are no lines between China and Korea and Korea and Japan. So there is like I don't know how to do that in the future. You see, in Japan and Korea and China, we don't have any co-management systems among these three countries. So that is, I think, a big problem still we see. And this is one of something to think about the current situation of Korean fisheries. And more than 3 million metric tons, and including catches 24%, and culture 61%, and DW is overseas fisheries, long distance water fisheries, is 12%, and inland is 1%. Korea is inland fisheries very small, only 1% of total productions. And also you can see there are many things in slide, and the fishery industries in Korea is very small. You see here 0.2% of the total GDP. I think it's more than 3% is good, but Korea cases only 0.2% of total GDP is fish industry. It's very small. And also how the many the fishermen is you see here, and 12 121,000, the fishermen, and only the household is 52,000 household. So that is the how amount of the household and the fishermen working in the fishing sector. And also with the last lines, the fishermen's incomes is, I think it's the 80% of the city workers. That meaning is most fishermen is low income levels in Korea. You can see it clearly. And this slide, so you see in here is one of something to considering about the EEG systems. Because in Korea was the high productivities per EEGs in national territory areas in most high productivity compared to other countries. So that meaning is the fishing grounds. Before I show you, there are some graph. And fishing ground is very high productivities in the Korean peninsula area, in eastern and western, southern area in Korea. And also the culture is the proteins in the culture levels globally, including seaweed in there. I think the most of the culture productions is seaweed in Korea. I see in later. And this is like in the fishing capacities, in the number of the fishing boats and number of horsepowers, and declining the 2000. But still we have the too many boats and too high level of horsepowers. But after 2000 is declining. I think that is one of we have buyback programs, or also there are so many the common programs to reduce the fishing capacity. That's why declining trend of this graph. And also we have something to like in catch productivities by horsepower and the fishing vessels. And this is a CPUE. You can see easily to find out how the catch abilities of horsepower and the fishing vessels. And one of the big problem is the horsepower cases. The CPU is very rapidly declining trends. So that meaning is the catch is almost stable, but the horsepower is very increasing last few decades. So that makes some problem of in Korean fisheries. And also one thing in here is you see in the fishing ground is smaller and smaller after EEG systems. And it's quite clear to compare and the left side and the right side. And the fishing ground has become smaller in 1994 and 2018. So fishing ground has become smaller in Korea. So that is happened in Korea after EEG systems. And also think about some scientifically to make some result in here is the fishing capacities is too high, and now the overfishing is a little bit down, and you see here there are some, the red area is over capacity and overfishings, but still we have some problems over in Korea. So last few decades, the capacity is increased. Increased meaning is the seeds from the green part to red part, and that meaning is increasing the capacity last few decades. That is happening in Korea. And also you see the stock resources declining trend, and almost the less than the MSY levels in Korea. So that is like in not good situations in Korea. There are too many boats and the resources too high, too low levels. So that is quite the same situation of globally we can see, chapter 1. And this is the catches. Catch also also resource levels. It's the declining trend of, I think it's from 1980, and the catch is declining, still declining trend. And before we have 1.7 million the catches in coastal area, but now we have less than 1 million the catches. So this is like in the capture fisheries in Korea, what is happening, and it's quite clear to know. And that is quite clear to recently how government developed the many the programs, like in the decommissioning schemes, buyback programs, and the self-governance systems, and also ecological-based fisheries management. And also we have stock rebuilding plans. You mean stock enhancement programs. And we spend a lot of money to encouraging the resource and encouraging the catch levels, but still you see here, the catch is almost the same levels, not much changes. And recently, the catches in coastal area is less than 1 million. So I think that we have more problem than before. Even government have many the programs to recover stock biomass or encouraging catches, but the catch or resources not changes. It's the same levels, or sometimes it's declining trend like that. This slide shows how many species catches in Korea in inshore and offshore. This is the main species, like in anchovies and common squid, and also mackerels, crabs, and also the herrings and horse mackerels, so hairtails, those kind of species, main species in Korea, and inshore and offshore. So I mean, before I say we have less than 1 million metric tons every year, so including this the major species in Korea. And this slide shows we catches every year in recently less than 1 million metric tons. So that is not enough in markets, and the supply and demand is in the balance. And we have a self-sufficient rate is, I think it's the less than 80%. So this is like in the same problem of globally, because the supply is increased, no supply is decreased, and demand is increased. Then we need more fishes. And then in here we see in self-sufficient rate is less than 80%. That meaning is we import the maybe 20% for domestic market. So that is what situation in Korea. And so now you can see here is in Korea in 2000, before 2000, the export is higher than import. But after 2000, the import is higher than export. So now in Korea become import countries. Before 2000, Korea was export countries. But after 2000, Korea now the import countries. We import a lot of the fishes from other countries, maybe including Timoros. And now we are concerned about the aquaculture in Korea. So before I show you, and the sufficient rate is less than 80%. So we need more fishes. And then we try to import from other countries. And also we culture. And I don't know culture, how many percent. Before I show you maybe 12% of domestic the supply from culture. And sometimes very difficult to know about something. But anyhow, culture is very important in Korea. So, but you see in next slide, and Korea Peninsula is the western part, eastern part, or southern part is quite different situation of culture. So that is why we have many different type of culture systems to develop before. So for example, in this slide is eastern part of Korean peninsulas. Is deep sea, and the coastal is very simple. And there are high the waves is here, and it's not easy to round up east part to culture, and that is what the situation on the eastern area. And this slide show you in the western part of Korean peninsulas. It's wide tide areas and also the high tidal ranges in this western part of Korea. So that's why in here is maybe we culture clams and some other, so quite the difficulty to using this part of culture the same. And quite different of eastern part of the western part of Korean area. And this is the southern part of Korea. And the southern part of Korea is the main area of culture. You can see in this slide. So there are many buoys to see white. And those areas is the culture of the oyster, the farming in this area. And we have many small islands of southern part. So that's why in Korea, in the culture system is quite different. The western area and eastern area and the southern area. I think mostly the culture in southern area, not the western or eastern area. So that makes sometimes some problems because of too many culture in the same place. And we already know about the very intensive culture systems in southern part. So that makes some problem of the environmental carrying capacity. So water quality is down, and productivity is declining, and many culture species diseases happen. So now we have some aquatic animal disease control programs because of too many cultures, the same place, or very intensive. So that makes some problem. And that is western part of Korea, you can see in this slide. And you see here, this is now the same western part of Korea. There are many islands and the fishing community area, in coastal area. There are many point you can see. And that area is culture. There are some oyster and some other seaweed, and also some area in shellfishes, in finfishes, whatever, many. So too many cultures in certain area in southern part of Korea. That meaning is something problem of some environmentally. Too many cultures is a small area, and that makes some problem of. And this is like western and eastern and the southern area. So what kind of species is culture in Korea? And eastern area we have scallops. That's mainly. And the western area is clams, and or sometimes in the shrimp and the prawn culture in there. And southern area is mostly culture in Korea. Some recently to develop the albaronic culture and the black rockfishes. And the most high level of culture is flounders in Jeju Island in southern part of Korea. And those there are many oyster culture and seaweed culture in southern part of. So this is mainly focus on how culture in Korea and western and eastern and southern part of the culture. And this is one of the development studies in Korea. So when we developed culture in the early 1960s and 70s, we only focused on seaweed culture. And then we developed in 1980 and early 1990s, we developed the shellfish culture. And the fish culture is developing recently. So this is why, because in Korea, even we have eastern, western, and the southern part have different culture, the situations, but mostly we are focused on seaweed and shellfishes. Why finfish culture is developed in recently, and that is we are not good place or good area to culture finfishes, because in Korea was everybody know about we have 4 season countries, and the spring and winter and the summer and fall. So we have 4 season culture, and the winter is a little bit longer than other seasons. So too cold in winter. So finfish cultures, the temperature is less than 10, and then it's not easy to feed. So that's why the finfish culture is not developed in earlier. And recently we developed finfishes, but still we are not good situation of finfish culture in Korea. And that is what we are mentioning about here. So this is aquaculture productions. So total is 2.3 million metric tons. And that is mostly, you can see in this slide, and seaweed. Seaweed is more than 76% of total production is seaweed. The finfish is only 3.7% of total aquaculture production. So that meaning is, I don't know some other countries not including seaweed, but in Korea, we culture in finfish is only 3.7% of total 2.3 million metric production cases. So total culture productions, and the fish is only 3.7%. So mostly in seaweed, more than 76% of seaweed is culture in Korea. So in Korean culture, it's only seaweed. So not the fishes, but some oyster and some other, maybe you can see in shellfish cases, maybe 18%, something like that. That is aquaculture production in Korea. So not good the contents to culture in Korea, because the fish is too small portions of total production, only 3.7%. And the same up here, and mostly there are the culture is you see here flounders, and also sea breams, and the black rockfishes, or some musculus like an oyster. So mostly culture is you see there are some flounders at high levels, and that is what the see about in culture in Korea. And recently in Korea to develop the salmon culture, and because the salmon consumption is increased over time, you can see in the graph. So now we start up the salmon culture in Korea, and I think it's 2014, something like that. And also we are using some the cage systems of the finfish cultures, but still in development stages, not quite good. But I think it's that is one of something to consider about. You see in this slide, this is we see the open sea the culture systems, because I saw you before in southern part of Korea. Too many areas already developed for culture, so there are no the remaining spaces. So that's why we have many problems of environmental problems is there. So now the government try to develop the open sea cultures, like using this kind of the huge cage systems, and then they make something to develop in open sea, but there is still a few companies try to culture in open sea, and this is a high the capital intensive culture systems, and that makes something to we see in economically the economic scale is needed to culture this kind of system in Korea. And then also we see in many different type of culture. You can see in this is like one of the Albanon culture in Korea. You see in abalone in culture, they feed by the seaweed, and then they culture in abalones in southern part of Korea. And this is a culture by many areas in Korea. There are oyster in southern part of the oyster culture is just the southern part of oyster culture is you see hanging systems in the culture oyster, but some other part of you see they're using some the tires to culture, and also using some small rocks, and also some using stick method to those part of oyster culture in the western area. You can see before in western area in Korea, they culture using tidal wide tide area to using this the tire method or some kind of small rocks or the bottom culture or stick using some bamboo and some green trees is using some stick method, something like that. We have many different type of the oyster culture method in Korea, but mostly in the southern part of Korea, we're using the hanging systems. Before I show you in part. The same of hanging culture in there, and there are many things that happen to see. They have some problem of, and recently you find out some productivity is declining, and also many diseases is increased. And this is a scallop in eastern area. We culture scallops in eastern area. It's the same of here, using many methods to see. And also this is also the hanging culture of in many areas to see. There are some the sea squirt culture, and the same of in the southern part of the area to see. And this is a shrimp culture in mostly in western area, and also the land-based culture of shrimps in Korea. So some part, but still we have the many disease in shrimp culture. So when we're using some area to culture shrimps, so every 3 years we changes the ground because of there are many virus problems happen in shrimp culture. And this is like in the seaweed culture. I saw you before in Korea. We have 2.3 million metric tons to culture, but among them, the 76% of the total aquaculture productions from this seaweed. Many the lever and the carp, and there are many different type of seaweed culture in Korea. And most of seaweed culture in Korea we to eat, so human consumptions for seaweed, because Korean people to eat seaweed is very likely every day to eat seaweed. And also like in carp cases, or using the abalone culture, we feed abalones of carp. We're using seaweed to feed abalone culture. So that is why recently we developed the abalone and the carp, the same the grounds to culture carp to feed abalone, and then abalone culture is developed recently. So that's why the seaweed culture, we are using the human consumption, also the abalone cultures. There are feed the sources to use that. And that is one of the things in Korea. And then now we are considering about in Korea, we developed the culture, have many problems. And that is we saw here. And because the culture in South Sea, and the one of the main problem is the typhoon is coming every year, many times. So the culture area is the southern part. And I think it's mostly developed to agriculture. The main problem is the seasonal, the strong storms, and typhoon is coming, and also red tide, and also many environment problems, because you see in Korea was developed the environmentally, so many coastal area in the southern part, like in the shipbuildings, and many main industrial area is coastal area in Korea. So that makes some problem of, some pollutions and many of whatever. So this is why we are in Korea, the aquaculture, especially in film fish cultures, is the last few decades is not good development status, because of we have many problems of like in typhoons and coastal development. So those kind of situations to make the big problem of coastal area. And you see here in domestic and overseas is the same up here. And many the part of problem of in the culture area. And to see is the same up here. You can see in there are one maps in Korea, southern part of the culture area is there are some. The line is so the typhoons coming from the southern part of the China Seas to come up in the Korean peninsulas. Every year, how many times to come the typhoons? So that make problem of the culture in southern part of Korea. And very difficult to explain about the. And then we developed recently how we try to solve the typhoon problems to culture fishes. So these kind of technologies in open sea, and we see people I say we develop new technology to culture in open sea to this kind of the cages to when typhoon come in, and then we put in water in the main the falls, and then these cages come down in the merges, and if this kind of systems is like in here, you can see there are at least 10 meters space water stay down of cages. Even typhoons come in, so there are no problems. So this is like we are trying to develop recently how the solve the problem of the inshore intensive the problems, and also we have typhoon problem. Typhoon is coming and try to merge these cages, maybe less than 10 meters down, and then there are no problems when typhoons come in. So this is a new technologies to develop the cage culture in Korea recently, in Jeju Island area. And that is, I don't know how the economically they make some benefit or not, because this is the very high level of capital intensive culture systems. So I just worry about that. And the same up here, you see there are some cages there, and they feed using some pipelines to in cages, and those kind of systems. You can see there are some yellow buoys there when the merges down in 10-meter spaces, and the typhoons come in. So this cage is down, and then we have to come up, come down, and this kind of open sea culture systems is one of the main part of in Korea to develop the aquaculture for the fin fish culture in Korea to see. And this is one of the cage culture using some, you see here there are some the brace net cages culture, and that makes something to positively to make some seaweed problem of cages. And many the eastern area or southern part of Korea, we're using this brace the cage culture, and that is I think it's good the technology to solve some problem of seaweeds and also other the problems of the offshore culture system in Korea. And the same up here, you see, there are many parts of the cage culture developed in offshore in Korea. And also we have something to develop some culture, and the seaweed and fin fishes and the shellfishes is the same place together. We say you see here, the polytrophic culture systems. So that meaning is seaweed and shellfishes and fin fishes, the same the ground is to culture together. And that is quite the environmentally positively to come out in both sides. And the many you can see in the polyculture systems among the seaweed and shellfish and fin fish together, the same farm ground. And the same appear in some kelp and also some other shellfishes, the same farm grounds. And this is a land-based culture of the flounders cases in many Jeju Islands. And this is a land-based culture systems. And sometimes they have very high the circulation systems to clean waters. And that is one of the mainly in typhoons comings, because this is on land. So culture is, I think, good to in situation of in Korea. Okay, so in chapter 2 is I just explaining about the Korean fisheries, the capture and the culture, and because the before 1985, and the fish industry was very high levels to encourage of coastal development, and also in 1950 and 60, so that times in Korean fisheries and the culture was very important roles to develop the local economics. But recently, I saw you before already, only 0.2% of total GDP is fish industry. It's a small part. But still in Korea, the fisheries is very important industries for the seafood securities. And also in Busan, and the people enjoy to eat seafood. I saw it before in the per capita consumption of seafood is annually there are 58 kilograms. I think more than double of global the averages. So I think the most high level of the global world high levels in the per capita consumptions of seafood is the 58 kilograms in Korea. So that's why the fishes and the seafood is very important industry still in Korea. And even the capture and the culture is not good the levels, but in the fishing market in Korea is a very good market. So that's why maybe, I don't know, later we will open in the market, demolish the seafood production and export the industries for the Korean domestic market about seafood cases. So that is one of the issue, the cooperations between the Timor and Korea about the fisheries industry development. Okay, so I finished chapter 2 and 5-minute breakers, and then I will start in chapter 3. See you later.